Welcome to the Freemium podcast, everybody. This is Curtis Killen. I got Michael Khoury in the house again, back by popular demand.
Round two.
Yeah, round two. Well, we're going to talk about a few things, but we're in the middle of our Zen conversation. But yeah, well, I'm going to assume if Jean Couture had it,
Yeah.
Jean Couture's not going to distribute anything illegal.
No.
And even to get it, I had to go behind, you know where the pharmacist is in the back?
Yeah.
And so I had to go to the counter, which I found kind of odd, because all the other Nicorette products, like the gum and all that stuff, was there. So I had to go ask them. And then this is about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, they were selling it. And now they're like, yeah, we don't sell that anymore. She got like upset when I asked her to. She's like, no, we don't sell those.
You know what that means? That means that you are the 900th person that day that asked her about Zins.
Yeah.
And she's just had it up to here. And she's like, no, get out.
Yeah, probably.
You're not the first person to ask if she got angry. There's no reason to get angry.
No, I agree.
So
I
it's
agree.
only possible if it's that.
Yeah, that's a good point. But no, the product itself, it's like, because I'm still addicted to nicotine. Okay, I don't really smoke. I'll smoke the occasional cigarettes. You know, if I'm having a few drinks, I'll have a cigarette here and there. I try not to because it's like it affects my lungs a lot more than it used to, like 10 years ago, for example. And the kick, the buzz that I get from a Zin is far superior than that of a piece of gum. I don't know why. Just like the kick right off the bat is better than with the gum.
But you've tried the gum?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I have gum. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the same dosage. So I'll have like a 4 milligram gum or a 4 milligram Zin. The Zin, I'll get way more of a buzz in comparison to the Zin. It's literally like the first cigarette of the day. I'll get the same buzz, but without having to smoke. I'm sure there's other health.
But Zin is pretty much just chewing tobacco.
No, it's not chewing tobacco.
No, I know it's not, but it's the same concept.
Yes, it's the exact same concept.
It's that nicotine delivery system.
Yes, I'm sure there's other health risks associated with, just outside of nicotine, because it's like, I'm sure it's not good for my gums. I'm sure it's not good for my throat. But apparently, we should probably ask Greg this, apparently it doesn't cause throat cancer or mouth cancer like chewing tobacco does. I haven't researched any of that. I have no idea if it's true.
I don't know. Like, if clearly we're not going to stop using nicotine, so we might as well just inject it at this point and avoid all the side effects. Like,
I agree.
Like, at this point, like, clearly people aren't going to stop using it. So if you want to reduce the harm, turn them into just people on the street heating up a spoon.
Yeah, I agree.
Because at this point, like, we're just finding different ways that are a little less harmful to get it. And it's not the nicotine necessarily itself that's the problem. It's the delivery system.
Yeah. You know what? I had other questions to ask you, but this leads to another really great question. And you know a lot more about this than I do. The drugs, the legalization, you're probably going to know all the details of this. What's going on in Vancouver and in British Columbia, Vancouver more specifically. So how they're giving out drugs, they're giving out, to my understanding, they're giving cocaine. They're giving, like, you can go to I don't want to call it a rehab or a treatment center, but you can buy it legally from store. Do you know anything about this? Where it's like legalization of hard drugs. And the logic, I understand the logic. The logic is, and I don't know what I agree with, because I'm kind of like a little bit, I think we're going to agree on this. I'm a little bit libertarian in the sense. It's like, well, if they're going to fucking do it, just sell it legally and manage it like through a government. You might as well just make tax revenue off at the same time. It's either that or you're going to buy it on the black market, and we start buying illegal drugs on the black market. You might get fentanyl in it. You might get all that kind of crap. So I honestly don't know where I stand on this, but do you know anything about this? Kind of like
I'd be extremely surprised. So I don't know anything about it, but I'd be very surprised if they were actually giving out drugs. To
my understanding, they are. Can you fact check that right now? I'm pretty sure
that would be drug trafficking. So I highly doubt it. What I believe that is some person reading about safe injection sites and putting the spin on it that they're dealing drugs. I believe that is someone from one of the wings who read a story about the safe injection site and exaggerated it, as they generally do, to twist the facts. So in Vancouver, they have safe injection sites that are already pseudo legal. Mm-hmm. So they're basically places with doctors and nurses that you can go, and you have to bring your own drugs, and they won't give you drugs, but they'll test the drugs to make sure there's nothing bad in them, and make sure the concentration isn't something that's going to kill you. And they allow you to take your drugs there, make sure there's not any adverse reaction. If there is, deal with it, and then send you on your way once you're good to go. So the benefit of something like that is, one, you don't get any overdose deaths. Two, you don't have that stuff going on in the street. And three, they check the stuff, and they're also able to notice when there's stuff coming in that has stuff in it that shouldn't be there.
Like fentanyl.
Yeah, like, and alert the police and tell them, this may be a problem. We're seeing a rise in fentanyl laced whatever it is.
Did you see anything,
Yeah.
Shem?
Finding something.
Yeah.
Vancouver supply program. That's what-
Vancouver supply program. Go on.
It seems like they are prescribing like a safer supply.
Of what kind of drugs? Like heroin,
Cocaine, heroin,
heroin,
amphetamine.
meth. Jeez.
I don't know. Then there's like a CBC article saying organizers of Vancouver Compassion Club say they'll continue to distribute tested cocaine, heroin,
So they are distributing
meth,
it.
despite rejection from Health Canada,
There you go.
calling it the only way to save lives.
Huh. What are they called? The Compassion Team?
This is the
Oh, jeez.
Vancouver Compassion Club.
The Vancouver Compassion Club. And so Health Canada does not, and that's a CBC article.
This is CBC 2022 though.
2022?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, if we can get,
Yeah, but I mean, it's possible, and if that's the case, it's probably a good idea. But it kind of already exists in pretty much everywhere in like methadone clinics. You know what I mean? Like, basically what they're doing is giving out a drug that's similar to heroin in every single way, except it helps you get off it because it's not as addictive, or it doesn't have as much of a what's it called? As much of a psychological effect, as much of a high. So there are things that are happening anyway, and whether that's giving them an appropriate amount of the drug and slowly weaning them off, if I'm all for it. Like, I don't see any way where that's a negative. Plus, like, nowadays Crown prosecutors aren't generally prosecuting possession of drugs, and it all goes along that way of reducing the legal burden so that you can start healing, essentially.
at what point do you think that they should start prosecuting like drugs? And I'm actually like, I'm on your, as much as you think I'm like a right wing nut job, I'm actually on your
You
side.
said it,
for-
not me.
Yeah. I'm completely on your side for that. I think it's completely ridiculous to, let's say 10 years ago, getting caught with a gram of weed and going to jail for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it was. I agree. I think it's completely ridiculous. But at what point, at what like amount do you think that people should be more harshly criminalized?
Well, I think it's like, it's pretty easy to determine that. Like,
let's say, for example, someone gets caught dealing the drug.
yeah, well, that's a totally different story. Now, if you've established that possession of the drug is legal and that dealing it is not, then that's a very easy distinction to make, because anytime someone deals it, then they're guilty of something. But you probably would have to have it so that possession of a certain amount would be presumed to be dealing it. So we already have that, which is possession for the purpose of trafficking. And basically the way it's kind of vague, but it's proved based on the totality of the circumstances. Like, if some guy's got a bunch of cocaine and little baggies and a scale, he can probably be found guilty of possession with the purpose of for the purpose of trafficking. So even if it's a little amount, if there's other things, or then if he has a kilo, it's also fairly obvious. So the line isn't as blurred as one might think. It's pretty easy to just say when and where something would be illegal and something wouldn't be.
Interesting. I'm going to switch gears now just because we're already talking about, and you're a lawyer by trade. How's work going, by the way?
Good. Can't complain. Yeah.
Any cool cases you can talk about that you've been to? Obviously without naming names or anything.
Yeah, I just won one
Have you ever
recently. Lost? Yeah, of course. Well, like, I mean, the whole point is I should be losing.
Yeah.
If I'm a criminal defense attorney and people are being charged with crimes, I better be losing.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not, then that's a really big problem. It means that people are being charged with crimes for no reason.
Would you ever be a criminal defense lawyer for the bad guys?
I am.
No, but like I'm
Okay.
talking like a organized crime guy. Like, you know that 100% this person is a mobster. Example, an
Okay.
Italian mobster. Let's
Yeah.
just say he's an Italian gangster in Montreal.
Okay.
You know he is. Everyone knows he is. But
How do I know? Is it his accent?
he speaks like Mike Saracino. Okay. So
That's what I was gonna say. He's gonna be so happy he was named in the episode.
Yeah.
There's got to be a clip.
He's speaking like Tony Soprano. He's
Okay.
walking around. He oozes of gangsterism.
Mm-hmm.
His father was a convicted criminal. He was part of the Omerta or whatever you call it. They're a gangster. And yes, nothing's been proven. Let's call it like you're basically gonna defend like a John Gotti
Okay.
type character. Would you take on a case like that? Because I feel the reason I'm asking this question, I feel like you like to defend the little guy who is in a way defenseless.
Yeah, I
against
do.
The court system, because like a lot of times, as much as people say it doesn't have an impact, if you have more money and more resources, typically speaking, and you can speak to this better than I can, typically speaking, I would think you obviously if you killed someone like out and 10 people saw a different story, but I'm saying generally speaking, you're probably going to have more resources and there's going to be a higher chance you'll come out as innocent
Yes,
if you have more
absolutely.
resources and more money. And you like to defend the guy
And
who
there's a
doesn't
higher
have those
chance you'll get
resources.
less severe of a penalty.
Yeah.
Just because you're rich. Because
Yeah.
some of the criteria in sentencing someone is their prospects for rehabilitation. If they have a supportive family, if they have a good job, if they are generally an asset to society, they're going to get sentenced less harshly. So for the same crime as someone who doesn't have all those things. So you're right.
So, but
Would I defend him?
Would you defend John Gotti?
Well, yes, but I probably wouldn't because
Okay.
I don't have based where I'm working right now, I would never be called to do that.
I'm just saying hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically, if I had the resources to do so and like the team around me, yes.
Why?
Because it's my job. Like literally.
Okay.
I don't, there's not very many cases that I wouldn't be able to do. The only ones I wouldn't and that I don't are animal cruelty, and that's just because I can't be objective. It's funny. I don't mind if you do the exact same thing to a human being. I can defend you.
You do it to a dog, forget it.
Yeah, just can't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't blame you on that. It's like whenever you watch a movie, like I don't care about someone dying, but if I see a dog
yeah.
dying, like it's like you're like, oh no, not the dog, not the
So
fucking dog.
when my sister was trying to get me to watch Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
and the first episode comes on, and I call her. I'm like, "There's 3 wolves in this episode. Do any of them die? Because if they do, I'm not watching this show anymore." And she lied to me, and so I kept watching it. I'm glad I did, but I was rattled when they died.
I just started watching The Sopranos.
Seriously?
Yes, no, I everyone's been telling me to watch it, and then finally like I got Crave, and I was like, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's epic.
I guess I'll watch it, and I like watching anytime there's any type of gangster documentary, gangster show. I just enjoy watching movie and content about organized crime. So I just started watching it.
Yeah.
Really good so far.
Crime in general. I mean,
Yeah, it's
The
just
Sopranos is amazing.
Yeah, it's just interesting. So while we're on the subject of courts as well, let's just hop right into this. Can you explain to me? I have a very novice understanding of the courts in Colorado, that basically wanted to take Trump off of the ballot in Colorado. We're gonna get right into Trump right now.
Okay, great.
let's get into this.
Topics worth talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is how we get the clicks, right?
Yeah.
Shem? Donald Trump, a very divisive figure, let's say. I think many politicians, most politicians, I would consider as divisive today. I think just the world's like a pretty divided place at this point in time. But this is why we have podcasts, so we can hash these things out and hopefully find common ground.
Absolutely.
What's so basically? Are you aware of the story at all, or like?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Well, I
So
mean, generally, yes.
So my understanding is basically they took him off the ballot due to the insurrection on January 6th, and they didn't want to have him on the ballot, even though he hasn't been found guilty yet. And what's going on here? What's your opinion on this?
Well,
Let me ask you this first. Do you
Yeah.
think that's okay to do, even though he hasn't been found guilty yet, to take a presidential candidate or likely presidential candidate off the ballot?
Okay. So I'm torn in with things like this because I don't like Trump. I think he's a cancer. I think he's absolutely useless to society, and anybody who thinks he isn't is also that useless. So thank you for having me on. But I have a problem with silencing people just because we don't like what they say.
I'm happy you're saying
Because
this.
I think it's a slippery slope. Now, if it was worth silencing anybody, he would be the one it would be worth doing it for. But it's also a slippery slope. So,
because at what point, who becomes the arbiter of truth at that time? And when you start disregarding institutions like the court of law, which is kind of what they've done.
Yeah,
but the point I'm just trying to make is like he hasn't been, and I agree with you, he hasn't been found guilty yet. So you can't have a judge that's saying, okay, well, this person isn't found guilty yet, but we're going to say he's guilty anyways. Oh, he can't be on the ballot.
well, there are special privileges. So it's not the same rules don't apply to certain domains. So hypothetically, a good example of this is with your driver's license. Driving is considered a privilege, not a right. And therefore, when you're stopped for a DUI, your license gets automatically suspended for a period of 3 months, regardless of whether you actually end up being found innocent or guilty of that DUI later on in court. And they do this because driving is a privilege and not a right. So there are certain things, not everything is as protected as everything else. So running for president is a very specific privilege that one can do, and suspending his right not to do that in certain circumstances isn't the same as basically removing one of his fundamental rights. Do you know what I mean? Of, let's say, I don't know, freedom of speech or freedom of religion or anything like that. So there are certain areas where you don't have to be found guilty in order to be able to be sanctioned in a certain way. Now, do I agree with that? Probably not. Mostly because I think he's going to be found guilty anyway, so might as well just wait. But the problem with the argument becomes, and the people that would advocate for him being removed would say, well, don't criticize us for disregarding institutions like the court. That's what Donald Trump does every day. And again, I just don't like that argument. I would rather...
But I mean, both sides do it, if I can just push back a little bit.
Yeah,
to
I
play
agree.
devil's
But that's what I
advocate.
mean.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean, is that I don't want both sides to do it. If he wants to do it, if he wants to break the law and ignore the rule of law, he can do that, and he'll suffer the consequences. you shouldn't also do it to stop him.
What are the consequences, though? Like, here's just like another example we're looking at right now. This is a question like I always ask. So this was in the news last week or 2 weeks ago. So the Emergencies Act that they imposed in Canada for the trucker convoy was found unconstitutional. They're going to bring it up to the Supreme Court, I think is next. But anyways, the first judge that came in, the Liberal Party, when they did that, it was found to be unconstitutional.
Right.
What two-part question? Like, what? I know they're gonna like fight that decision on the taxpayers' dime. By the way, just to save face. What? So let's just say they fight it and they lose again. What happens? Like, I just asked myself this question: like, does Trudeau just not become the prime minister anymore? Like,
no.
What?
So I mean, in Canada, it's a little bit different because, well, causing an insurrection is a crime.
Yes.
Whereas enacting a certain law that's there when you shouldn't have is not a crime. It's basically the government can essentially be asked to pay damages for whomever suffered damages. It's a fault. It's a mistake. It's a civil fault, meaning they didn't do anything illegal. What they did is not properly use something that's legally provided for. You know what I mean? So,
because it's basically just if I could just let me explain like a little bit more. It's my understanding right now is I always thought it was government overreach. The first court that they went to is basically agreeing with what I just said. This is government overreach. You shouldn't have enacted the Emergencies Act when the truckers were there.
Basically, that the conditions did not exist that would allow you to do it.
Yes.
That's basically what they said.
Yes, exactly. So it's, but yeah, I'm like, okay, so you kind of answer my question because like there are no real consequences. Okay, we shouldn't have done it.
Pretty much no. But I mean, again, if they overstep their boundaries, there can be reparations that are linked to that. So if you're a business or if you're someone who suffered at the hands of this enactment of the Emergencies Act, you can claim damages from the government to what you suffered. That's a civil litigation. That's civil litigation that I'm not too familiar with. Yeah. But it's very rare in any domain that the government or even any business becomes criminally liable or faces any kind of penal sanctions whatsoever. If they accuse you of a crime and you end up getting acquitted, nothing happens to them. Nothing. The person that accused you of a crime, the random person off the street, nothing happens to them. Unless you can prove that they did it on purpose and lied, in which case then they're criminally liable. But if they just if they didn't do something willfully to hurt you, then nothing happens. So it's just.
Do you think that what they did was government overreach?
Yeah, of course. If the court said, well, I don't know.
I'm asking you personally.
I don't know. I
putting
think
you on the spot.
I think they were put in a position where. Which part are you talking about? Which part of the Emergencies Act? Because there's many things that it can be used for.
Let's start with freezing of bank accounts. And you worked at TD.
Did freezing whose bank accounts?
Anyone who was linked to the trucker convoy or anyone who even donated to the trucker convoy, which in my opinion is fucked.
I'd be surprised that they froze bank accounts of people who donated.
They went that far.
Yeah, okay. Then I would probably say that's overreach. What I don't think is was it? I don't even know if it was even necessary in the first place. The people that are responsible for it are basically facing criminal charges now. Some of them have been found guilty of them. The whole thing was, they could have just sent in the police and just told them to go home.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? I know it's harder than that because there were a lot of people.
Yeah.
But you're right. I agree with you. I don't necessarily, if that's what happened, if they froze people's bank accounts just for donating, then I think that's overreach.
And it's also, it sends a message to the internet. Like, you can't mess with people's banking systems. Like, that's really with regards to
That seems like a lot.
Yeah, and especially with regard, it's a lot more than people actually understand, and a lot of Canadians don't realize this. But when you're freezing bank accounts, what does that send to the international business community or anyone who wants to invest in our country? Like, you always hear about China. A lot of business people, a lot of people with money that want to invest in the country, they're very reluctant to invest in the country because you never know what the government's going to do. You know, they could seize your assets. You can invest in the country, and all of a sudden the CCP the next day goes, oh, we're going to take all these assets. That could happen. And that's one of the reasons why. So it's like a high risk, high reward. Well, not reward right now because they're like in a pretty big funk, economically speaking. They're in recession. But people like to invest in the West. I find it's changing a little bit now. Like, and I kind of want to talk about this because, like, the West, I find it's not like the beacon of hope that it was 30 years ago. And this, I'm not just speaking about North America. I'm talking about the West in general.
Yeah.
And just back to the banking part. If you all of a sudden are sending signals to the rest of the world, hey, by the way, we could seize your assets. The U.S. did this to Russia. I don't agree with what Russia did, but when Russia's holding whatever billions of dollars in treasuries and American debt, and the U.S. just basically goes, snaps their fingers and go, oh, all that money's useless. You're telling the rest of the world, hey, if you're doing something that we don't like, this could also happen to you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go. I understand your point, and I pretty much agree with it. I just wouldn't relate that to freezing a couple dozen bank accounts. Like, I just don't think that's on the same level. And the people that were organizing this trucker rally, while I may think that the government overstepped, I don't want that to be misconstrued as me saying that I support that in any way. I think they're absolute degenerates and probably deserved whatever they got, and they are getting it now. I think that woman from Calgary got a jail sentence. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the blonde woman, I forget her name.
Stuff. I don't know either, but I know which one you're talking about. When you say they're absolute degenerates, you're talking about the Liberal Party, or you're talking about the truckers? I'm not talking about
the truckers.
Okay.
Because the truckers had a legitimate gripe.
Yeah.
With what they believed was an injustice. Do I agree with them? No. But they had a gripe about what affected them personally. Who I'm talking about is all those little bandwagon jumpers that have nothing to do with trucking, that just wanted to further their point of view, or that were sick and tired of not being able to go out and drink on a Saturday night and adopting the truckers all of a sudden when they couldn't give a shit about them before as their own. Because
I don't think that's what it was, though. I don't think it was them trying to support the truckers. I think it was them rallying with the truckers saying we've had enough. And basically, when you're going to other countries,
had enough of what?
Of lockdowns and government telling us when we can go out, where we can go out. I mean, for fuck's sake, we had a curfew. When I was in the U.S. during COVID, and I told them we have a curfew, they looked at me. They're like, "And everybody just listens?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretty sad." And I find that there's a lot of people, Canadians as a culture, Quebecois as a culture, we are compliant people by nature.
I would completely disagree.
I mean, if you look at the stats or how we behave, not what we say. During lockdowns, we were extremely compliant. We listened to everything until the end.
Maybe we were compliant during that, but
give me an example of where Canadians are not compliant. I mean,
no, I'm not talking about Canadians. I'm talking about the French Canadian culture.
Let's just talk about Canadians. I'm just saying.
Okay, well, Canadians maybe, but I was more referencing French Canadian culture.
Really, I find they're a compliant culture. I'm interested.
No, all French Canadians do is protest, and good for them.
Yeah, they do.
That's their whole history is based on.
Yeah. It's a French thing. France loves that too.
Yeah, exactly.
They like that too.
Exactly. So now, with all this said, I just don't believe in the conspiracy theory of, or what I would call conspiracy theory of, the government is trying to control us. I think that they were dealing with an unknown. They took advice from who they thought were the experts in the field, and they acted as best as they possibly could. There may also be a day where there's something way worse than COVID that comes, and that is way more deadly. And if we behave in the same way as the truckers did and all their entourage, it may go very, very badly. Now, you can't, I understand that it's a lot to ask for a curfew, but saying that it'll never be justified, maybe it wasn't justified in this case, but saying that it'll never be justified is dangerous, because everybody is saying that there can be, well, I mean, we've seen viruses that are way worse, that are way more contagious and way more deadly. And right now we've managed to control them, but one day maybe we can't. That's what eliminated half of the world's population, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like, that could be a problem. And are we going to react the same way next time? I don't know. I hope not.
But do you think that, like, I don't fully buy when you say governments are not trying to control us?
I think they're trying to control us in different ways.
Like what? Because I would disagree with that statement. Like, why are they trying to? I'm not trying to say, well, not at the point yet. I hope it never gets to this point. So I wouldn't say, for example, it's like a Big Brother from George Orwell, where they're trying to control us to that extent yet. But why is there a talk of central bank digital currencies? Like, why? Well, one of the reasons I firmly believe is because they want to be able to control as much of the population as they possibly can. And how do you do that? You control it through money. So if you owe
to what end?
Well, time will tell.
But that's what I'm saying.
Like, the government today has a lot more. They are a lot more involved in everybody's day-to-day life than versus 100 years ago.
Okay, granted. Now, that's way more the case in the States than it is here.
You think the government's more involved in the U.S. than here?
Yes.
How?
You ever heard of the Patriot Act?
Yes.
Yeah. So the states, the American government, I mean, look, I'm not going to claim that doesn't happen here. It probably happens here too.
The Inflation Reduction Act, which isn't going to reduce inflation.
I don't know. It probably happens here too. But what I'm saying is that we give governments full control over our lives in the form of our cell phones. Mm-hmm. So when everybody was saying that, like, these COVID things are just a way to track where we're going and what we're doing and who we're seeing, that's horseshit. Like, they already can do that if they wanted to. Yes. They had no need for any of that. So all that rhetoric about that stuff was just, it was stupid. Yes, the government has a bunch of control on us, but I would argue the whole point of controlling a population now, when I ask you to what end and you can't answer, it's because there isn't a rational reason why they would need to. The reason people want control is money. And that's why, if anybody's controlling us nowadays, I think it's major corporations that are controlling us. And they're doing so for money. We are basically, with these like data farms and stuff, we are basically like in a version of the Matrix where they're farming data off us and making money, and we have no protection against it, and everybody's just letting it happen.
But this is where it's like, I get what you're saying about the government, but it's, I was trying to formulate my thoughts before you were coming here. Uh-huh. I feel like your opinion is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, your opinion is, if major corporations actually paid their fair share in taxes, everything would be la-di-da-di, everything would be fantastic, and society would thrive. I completely disagree with that.
Okay.
And I disagree with that because I don't think governments are able to redirect resources, the resources being tax revenue.
Well, they already do.
I don't think it, and they do it very inefficiently.
For sure.
So I think them getting more money, like, it's basically control of institutions. And right now they're both in bed with each other anyways. But it's like, if you have, like, the government in Canada and in the US and a lot of other places in the West, this is why I have such an issue with government overreach and governments getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, so I read two reports, one from the Fraser Institute. It's right wing. So they basically said since 2020, I think I've mentioned this stat before. Since 2020, it was 88% of all the new jobs created in Canada were government. I'm like, oh, I'll take it with a grain of salt. But then a bank came out with it. This is a lot more believable. It was one of the big banks. Well, there's only a couple of banks. I think it was CIBC or RBC. One of the banks, Canadian banks, said, and they did the same report, and they said 50%, which is still a fucking big number. Why?
Because
well, here, just let me finish my point and let
go
you say
ahead.
it. But it's like, so since February 2020, all the new jobs that have been created in Canada, like, oh, look at the jobs reports, fantastic, have been government jobs. Governments don't add to the productivity of a country. They extract resources. And just, I'll give you a little example. Go to any government and ask, like, if you go to a private corporation like KBD Insurance or a corporation, any business, a private enterprise, he looks at his watch.
No. It vibrated.
Like a private enterprise, you're going to ask, like myself and the leadership in the company, we need to track our productivity. How much money we're putting in? What's the productivity we're getting back? There's a profit. Hopefully, if there's not profit, there's no business. But all this to say, we track productivity. If I'm spending X amount on salaries, I need to see this much production. There is nobody in government that even does that. It doesn't exist. The role doesn't exist. So when you're increasing the bankroll in government by 50%, and bureaucrats you constantly hear this, and people are getting like, hey, I'm living fucking paycheck to paycheck. I can't afford the groceries anymore. I can't afford the rent because it's doubled. I can't buy a house. I'll never be able to afford a house. And these fat cats are increasing their salaries. Go fuck yourself. And I understand. No, but like,
okay, well, let me. I need to address that in many different layers. First of all, you just switch the stat. First, you said 50% of all new jobs were government jobs,
Yes.
and then you said that the government jobs are increasing by 50%.
no, the payroll, the bankroll.
Why? That's not the same thing. If 50% of all new jobs are government, that just means that of all jobs, half of them
fair enough, but
are
that's a
government.
small- okay, fair
that
enough.
could
That's-
easily mean, and what I believe it means,
Yeah.
and that stat does seem skewed, and I believe there's a reason for it. And it's because all corporations are trying to maximize their profit.
Yes.
So what they're doing is they're getting rid of people and not hiring new people on the advice of
But Michael, if you
McKinsey
have,
and these other consulting firms to limit
the
their
market. No, this is like, I don't. It's not just some conspiracy. Yes, are they trying to maximize?
It's not a conspiracy.
Profits? No, but are they trying to
maximizing
maximize
profit
profits?
is
Of
not a
course.
conspiracy.
Capital money is going to flow to businesses that produce the best return. This is the system that we have called capitalism. Money in a stock market. If I can
Not
make,
necessarily.
If I can make,
It's the people that have the less cost as well.
if I can make 10% on a dollar with this company, or I can make 15% on a dollar with that company, I'm going to go to the company that's going to give me 15%.
No,
I'm
not necessarily.
saying most people will. The number one rule in economics when you learn in school is people are greedy. They're
Yes.
going to make more money. So
And
let's just
if it worked,
if you want to be altruist,
the way you learn in economics, the world would be a better place.
if you want to be altruistic and give it to the company that's making 10% because they hire, I don't know, whatever, like 50% women or
let's
something.
cut off that thought before it gets you in trouble.
Then go right ahead. But the point I'm just trying to make is that this is the system of capitalism. Excuse me. Capitalism, money is going to flow where it's going to get the best return.
No, capitalism is maximizing profit at whatever the cost.
Because investors, if they want to get money, they need to have the most profit they possibly
Correct.
can in order to attract capital to further
So
expand
the
their
business
business. Right? Would you agree
are
with that? though?
prisoners
But
of their investors and will
They
do
are at the mercy,
everything
sometimes,
that is
yes.
in the investors, no, all the time, because they're legally obliged to do it.
Yeah, okay, fair.
They will do what is in their investors' best interest,
Yep.
not necessarily in the company's best interest. And definitely not in society's best interest.
See, but this is where there are, and this is always the argument that we just get into. And like corporations, are there examples of corporations that have like pulled fast ones? Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not going to say there aren't.
Please don't speak of it as the exception, though.
There are some greasy motherfuckers out there. I'm not going to deny that.
Every single big multinational corporation now is a tax evader in wherever they sell.
because they can do it legally.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
Yeah. And why can they do it illegally?
Because they pay off. They have
That's
lobbyists
correct.
to pay off
Yes.
people that work in government.
That's right.
Yeah.
So whose fault is that?
We've had the same debate. I don't want to go on the same debate we
Okay,
had last time.
fine.
But basically, it's just like because we're beating a dead horse. We can go back to the last podcast. Freemium
Maybe with
listeners,
your
if you
argument,
wanna-
yeah.
But okay, so let's elaborate. We'll agree to disagree there. You're saying corporations don't pay their fair share of tax. Okay, fair. They don't pay their fair share of tax. If they did pay their fair share of tax, I think society would be a lot better. I would like you to elaborate on that. But before that, what I would like to say is I completely disagree. What I think would actually end up happening is that if more money was in the hands of government, more money than it already is, and they collect a hell of a lot more taxes on a per capita basis than they did 30 years ago. That's for damn sure. They don't know how to allocate capital.
Maybe not per person, per capita, fine, but that's kind of irrelevant. It's more
bigger,
per person.
They have more power and more influence than they have in a long time, the government right now. So my argument is just we can agree.
I don't necessarily disagree.
But it's like, so if they if we're just going to redirect resources, which is money, take it out of the capitalist hands, take it out of the greedy corporations, put more of it in the government's hands, I think we would be even worse off. Right now, I'll let you go. I'll let you have the floor. I have more points, but I keep talking. I'll let you go.
Okay, so we just established that the corporation, on paper, legally, their obligation is to their shareholders.
Yes.
And nobody else. On paper, the government's obligation is to their constituents, meaning all of society.
Theoretically,
So if I had the choice to place my money in one hand or the other, why would I ever choose to put it in the hand of the corporation who legally cannot act in my interest must act in...
Why have private enterprises at all then? Why not just have government run everything?
Well, because there's a balance to everything. And even in capitalism, when it was established, when it was thought up, there were areas that were government run. There's no such thing as a pure free market, even by the inventor of capitalism. So there are certain things that you cannot leave up to corporations.
Such as
healthcare, such as some of the basic necessities. Because it's no longer about competition.
I'm not arguing that we should abolish healthcare or the education. That's not what I'm saying.
I know. Because in some areas, it's not about sometimes competition doesn't bring what you always believe it's going to bring, especially when it's a good that people need. You know what I mean? So it's very easy to pick one instead of the other when it's something that you just want, or it's something that you don't need to survive. When it's something that's needed for the basic fabric of society, it's too dangerous to leave it in the hands of corporations because they'll exploit it.
So you're saying at a time in Canadian history where our country is having a massive productivity issue, and if we have a massive productivity issue, we're hundreds of billions of dollars in debt.
Well, as is every other country.
Yes, but we have an issue right now. We're running out of money, and at a time where productivity is at a 15 or 20-year low in Canada, you're advocating for more taxes.
You know what the best way to make up a debt is?
Is that what you're saying?
Is to tax. It's a fact. That's the only way. If you want to eliminate...
Sorry, but can you ask the question?
Yes, go ahead.
That was my question. At a time in Canada where we have a horrible economic outlook
what you're saying is you want... So
I want to spur economic activity in this country.
And the only way to do so...
There's too much red tape. There's too much bureaucracy. The taxes are too high for... And like I don't have fancy lawyers. I can't pay... I got to pay my taxes. If I get a corporate tax, I'm paying that damn corporate tax.
Yes.
I pay all my taxes. I can't hide. So I pay for everything. And most companies do. You get the multinational... This is what...
Yeah, most companies do, but... in total of the amount that has to be paid.
I understand, because it's like I think 50% of the economy is probably multinational
Exactly.
corporations, something like that.
Yeah.
I get it. So there's a big portion of the Canadian economy and the American and other economies too they get special treatment. I'm not going to say they don't.
Wouldn't it be nice if they didn't and you only paid what you could afford in tax?
We're living in la la land. But
No,
basically,
we're not.
But you're not.
We're
you're,
living.
You're
They've
still not answering the
convinced
question.
you that that's
Mike,
la la
Mike,
land.
we're still not answering the question.
Yes.
There's a productivity issue here in Canada. The economy is not doing well. Looking forward, the future of the economy by organizations like the OECD, we are in trouble. We have a productivity issue in Canada.
What are the ends to that? Like, what are we? What is the problem to be solved? At the end of the day,
we need to have enough people working so that we can pay for our welfare state. If we don't have productivity in the country,
well, we can just tax corporations more, and then we have money for our welfare state. Or we can bring in immigrants, which we're doing, to work.
Do you think we're bringing in too many immigrants right now?
Absolutely not.
Oh, wow. Why? Why?
Well,
what?
Because you just said we have a productivity issue.
Why would we not? GDP per capita has been dropping for the past year and a half.
Yeah, why would we not bring in immigrants if we have a productivity issue?
What do you think what do you think the biggest contributing factor to our out of control housing right now is? And again, this is going to be, people are going to say,
if you believe it's
you're
immigration,
Mike,
you're just wrong. It's
Mike,
this has been happening.
I'm going to start spitting facts.
This has been happening for years before we started bringing in more immigrants.
We bring in the most immigrants per capita in the world now, okay? And we brought in 500, this is just last year, and they made a mistake. We brought in 500,000 permanent residents, 500,000 non-permanent residents. It's more than 10x than what it was just 5 years ago, okay? So I'm not saying that, like, I'm against immigration. What I'm saying is, if we don't have the resources, we don't have the proper healthcare, we don't have the enough doctors, we clearly don't have enough housing. There's not a supply of housing to get to the market right now in Canada. This is why shelter and mortgages, mortgages are the interest rates, but this is why no one's going to disagree that the cost of housing in Canada is out of control. Everyone agrees with that.
Yes.
And if do
you know why?
But one of the biggest components of CPI is what? Shelter. Shelter keeps going up. These interest rate increases that they're putting out, well, if inflation's at 3%, they got to keep putting their interest rates higher. You know how this works. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have as much inflation going on right now, and if we had less immigration coming into the country, our inflation rate would be lower based off, it's a simple math. CPI, a big part of CPI is shelter, supply and demand. If we don't have any supply of housing units or apartment units to give to these people, what's going to happen to the price? It's going to go up. You can't argue with rents have gone up, that they've doubled in the past.
So how do you argue rents going up for the last 50 years in Vancouver and Toronto when we weren't bringing in immigrants?
They haven't doubled the past 4 years, Mike.
Yeah, I understand. But
Mike, it's doubled in 4 years. Come on, man.
Yeah, I understand. It's because companies are building high-end properties and not building anything else.
So you don't think it's a supply issue?
Of course, there's a portion of it that's a supply issue. Is the supply issue caused by immigration? No. Because there are some...
Time out.
Okay. There are some areas that are everywhere in the country.
Yes.
Housing is getting more expensive.
Yes.
But not everywhere in the country is hosting new immigration. Do you think there's immigrants that are going to fucking Val-d'Or? There aren't. But their housing costs are going up just as much as anywhere else percentage-wise. Why is that?
They're not.
Because there's a fundamental problem.
You are right that there are immigrants, like, for example, most of them go to Ontario and a lot of them go to British Columbia. That is true, for sure. And there are other parts of Canada where they are not experiencing a doubling in housing costs as well. That's true. That's true. Like Calgary, for example. Toronto, like, doubled, or I think more than doubled in the past, like, 4 or 5 years. Calgary has not, so that's a good point you're bringing up. But the main thing is just, like, if we're bringing in, all I'm saying is this: when you bring in this many immigrants and we don't have I'm not saying, like, oh, fuck the immigrants. If we don't have the resources to take care of them, we shouldn't be bringing them in. We need to take care of our own people first. And the fact that, so would you disagree?
The reason we're not taking care of our own people is because people aren't paying their fair share of taxes. That's the problem.
What?
Then how else would you like to take care of our own people? It's funny how
so you're saying
all of a sudden
I should pay more tax.
No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not what I've been saying from the beginning. But it's funny how as soon as it comes to immigration, people all of a sudden say, well, let's take care of our own people. It's before immigration came, nobody gave a shit about our own people. It's only now that people are coming here. Well, no, we need the resources for our own people. It's interesting that you only give a shit about our own people now that other people are coming. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Can you go?
It's
see
like that Republican.
Can you go see a doctor? I can't see my doctor anymore.
Yes, I can. Very easily. There's this Republican meme about about them caring about
I can't see my doctor.
them caring about fetuses, and how it's funny, but once they're born, they couldn't give a shit about them and don't care if they get a good education, but they definitely want them to be born. And then once they're drug addicts or they're on welfare, they don't want to pay them, but they definitely didn't want them being aborted at the beginning. You see what I'm saying? It's so hypocritical that
What's hypocritical?
it's hypocritical to say we should be taking care of our own people when that's been an option for the last 100 years before we started allowing a bunch of immigrants to come. And nobody cared about it before.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Everybody's saying, oh, well, you're on welfare. You're milking the state. You're doing nothing.
That's not what I said.
No, I know that's not what you're saying. I'm not saying
Okay.
you personally.
Okay.
I'm saying people in general. The resources to take care of immigrants. So what do we do then? Do we just start building housing and tell them
pretty
we'll be ready
simple.
for you in 10 years? Who's going to build that?
Private
For no one to live in?
Mike, the numbers are. I saw a stat today. I don't
Who's
have it
gonna
off
pay?
the top of my head right now. The numbers are clear as bro. You can't debate this.
Who's going to pay for
on
housing?
a per
Tell me.
capita basis? The private sector, first of all, and if the numbers made sense, if
But no one's going to live in them. How are they going to? Why would
Mike,
they build
there is
that?
a housing shortage, bro. There absolutely. If all of a sudden, hypothetically speaking, tomorrow,
No,
boom,
but I'm saying to build for the immigrants to come.
If forget the immigrants, I'm just talking the population as a whole. If let's just say our population froze tomorrow, 40 million, whatever, 41 million, wherever we're at.
Yeah.
And they built another million, 2 million, 3 million units of housing over the next 3 years, which they're not going to do, but let's just say the housing prices would drop. They would. Absolutely, they would drop.
Of course.
So what I'm saying is right now, it's kind of a perfect storm. Yes, interest rates caused a lot of general contractors and construction companies going like, okay, well, the math doesn't check out. I'm not going to build right now because I can't make money on this.
No, they can't make the money that they want to make.
If they can get a better return somewhere else, back to capitalism, they're going to go build something
Correct.
else where they're going to get 50%.
Screw the population. We're going to make it where we can.
That's up
we
to
don't
the
give
government
a shit.
to incentivize.
All of a sudden,
They're a private
All of a
company.
sudden, the government has to. Okay, that's what I'm
Because they're
saying.
taxing
so
too
you
much.
need the government,
Bro,
when you-
33K. Here, I'll spin another fact at you. Bro,
Please
it
do.
wasn't like this 25 years ago. 33% to build a housing unit today. 33%.
33% of what?
Of the cost is
Yeah.
taxes through one form or another. GST, HST, this tax, that tax. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. You can fact check this, or the I hope the fans
From the Fraser Institute?
No, Mike. This is not from the Fraser Institute. This is I love listening to real estate stuff because it's like there is an issue here. I educate myself on this a lot. 33% of the cost of a unit of housing is taxes today. Well, the construction company is going to pass those costs on to the person who's buying it.
Of course, because
Right.
God forbid they assume anything.
Well, then they wouldn't have a business, Mike, because they wouldn't
What
be
do you mean?
making any money.
Oh, you're right.
You can't just
They
give it
wouldn't
away
be-
for free.
You're correct. It's for free. That's what they're doing. They're making 80% profit, and now we're telling them you can only make 50. And they're
not
like,
making
"You're right." Well,
80% profit. Margins are razor thin.
I'm just throwing out.
Margins
I'm
are
throwing
razor
out an
thin.
example. Obviously, they're not making 80% profit, but that's
But you're
basically what it is.
You're basically just disagreeing with the facts I'm trying to tell you, and you're kind of like, no, that's
No,
not true.
because that's the benefit you get from being right is the facts. If someone who's wrong tries to present facts, they're some way skewed. Because I know at the end of the day that they're wrong.
So how would you
I could
fix-
just
how-
figure out how they're
Okay,
wrong.
So step one, do you think we have a housing issue here in Canada right now?
Yes.
Okay, how do we fix it?
You build more houses.
Okay, how do we build more houses?
You incentivize companies to do it if they won't do it out of the goodness of their heart. And we know that they won't.
Okay, good. And how do we incentivize them?
We force them.
That's not how the economy works.
God
right?
forbid.
But you force
Just like
them.
Loblaws has raised their prices because they can.
Hold on. Did you?
God
but
forbid
did you
we
actually
force them to lower their prices.
So did you? Okay, so now we're just going back to basically an economy run by
No,
bureaucrats.
absolutely not.
So well, forcing a private corporation, that's not an economy run by bureaucrats.
Well, I'm forcing you to pay more for your food. I can't force Loblaws to charge less? Isn't that weird? It's like
They had
you
a
can
summit-
Force,
they had
you
a
can
summit,
force
by the
your
way-
entire population to pay more for food, the vulnerable people in your population, and yet, God forbid, you force Loblaws to make 1% less profit. Now you're in a totalitarian country. Meanwhile, fuck the population that has to spend an extra money on things that they need to survive.
But now we're talking about price controls, and price controls don't work. They just end up having the cost. It just skews the market
You're right.
and the supply and demand. Just
What we
the
have now
cost.
is working.
But okay, back on the construction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So your solution would be fuck cutting taxes and incentivizing them to build more housing units. It would be force them to build housing units starting tomorrow. That would be your solution.
No, it would be to
You just said the
subsidize their housing units, meaning that
How would you
they-
subsidize them?
Well, because you give them a certain profit that's guaranteed. So it's a lot better than
Which is
cutting
this-
their taxes. It's the same thing realistically, but it's making them accept a certain profit margin. And if they give a shit about the society that they're operating in, then they're going to do it. But they're only going to do it.
Is it the corporation's issue that the housing costs are out of control? Is it because of them? Or is it because that maybe our immigration policy is a
It's
little bit
kind of
wacko
because
right
of
now?
them.
Okay, and you don't think so? It has no blame on
Of
government.
course it does. Of course, no. I mean,
It does.
I think a
Okay.
lot of people are to blame for it. The banks are to blame for it.
Okay.
A lot of people are to blame for it.
Okay.
It's just you're right in the sense that one person can't fix it because one person didn't cause it. But if everybody wipes their hands of it and says it's not my problem, then it's not going to get any better.
I agree.
Right? So
Yeah,
it has
I
to be
agree.
a concerted effort all around. That's why I'm saying subsidize the builds that they do, but they don't even want to do that, the construction companies, because it doesn't give them a profit margin that they're comfortable with, because now they're also beholden to shareholders. So there's companies now that are structuring themselves essentially as investment firms, even though they're construction companies. And so now they can no longer decide what to build because they're beholden to their shareholders who are expecting a certain return.
And government needs to understand this. And if they did understand this and want to build more housing and want to incentivize it,
then they just have to pay them more?
They need to cut the taxes on it. Mike, 25 years ago, the cost of building a unit of housing was between 5 and 10%. It's 33 now. The Canada is built on housing and the construction of housing.
Yeah, and
that's
the
like
cost
50%.
of selling the unit is also way more expensive.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
No, like I'm not going to.
But that's what I'm saying.
I don't know how we got here.
Is the
It's-
construction companies making the same amount of money at the end of the day?
Their margins are the same,
Yeah.
yes, but it's costing them more to build a unit of housing than
For
it
sure.
did 25 years
I
ago.
don't disagree with
and
you.
what I'm saying is a big chunk of that, yes, it's the cost of materials, yes, it's the cost of labor. There's all these costs that go up with inflation
Yeah.
and other things, but there's more taxes now in it than what there was 25 years ago. This is just a fact, and there's a lot more tax in it.
Probably.
And the tax that's there gets passed on to the consumer.
Yeah, because we allow
gets-
it to.
Mike, someone's got to pay for it.
Yeah, and it's never the company. That's my point.
that's not
but that is how it works, Curtis. That's my point. So Loblaws, okay, put it this way. Okay. So inflation exists, right?
Yeah.
So Loblaws and all these big supermarkets,
Yeah.
It's costing them more money to get their product. Shipping costs are up and
Carbon tax.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's costing them more money.
Yeah.
And instead of telling them that's the cost of doing business if you want to do business, we allow them to raise their prices and pass the costs off onto the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Why should they be allowed to do that?
Because it's a private market. It's a free economy.
Yeah, okay. So in a free economy, you're forced to pay more. So the only person that's not being forced to do anything here is the businesses. Do you think that do you think that that's right? Do you think that's right that Loblaws
it has nothing to do
they have a record year when their prices are high and people are suffering?
I absolutely.
You think that's a problem?
I do think it's a problem. I think it's a massive problem. But I think the government coming in with that useless bullshit summit they had, and since the summit,
it was complete bullshit because it's a farce because the companies would never let anything happen.
Of course. And this is why it's bullshit. So we're gonna hold a summit and speak to these CEOs. We're gonna speak to Galen Weston and tell him to drop his prices. Okay. And prices have gone up since. I think it's ridiculous, the price, and it's basically it's Sobeys, Walmart, Costco, and Loblaws and Metro. Those 5, is that 5 or 6? Anyways, they have 60% of Canada's grocery market.
Yes, correct.
Okay? Which is a lot. Do I think that costs are too expensive? Yes. I don't think the solution is having the government come in and regulate pricing. I think there's a competition issue, and I think if there was to be more, there's many issues here at play.
Okay, I agree. There's a competition issue.
There's a competition
issue. How does a competitor get into this market?
It's a difficult market to come in, and that's what needs to be fixed. And this is the issue that
by reducing regulation.
This is the issue we have in Canada. These companies end up owning the market through regulatory capture. No competitors can come in. It's not incentive. It's too difficult, and the how much capital you need to actually start a company. It's not like what it was.
But it's regulations that would keep these companies in check. It's like you want regulation on one end and don't want it on the other end.
I think look. Your way of basically you want more regulation for the big corporations, and we've talked about this before.
And you want less for the small?
More regulations for the big corporations. They don't end up having to deal with them anyways because they have the lobbyists to get around the rules and the regulations anyways. I think we both more or less agree with that. So basically, the little guys are the guys who have to end up dealing with the red tape at the end of the day.
I agree.
That is a problem, and they can't come into the market. And Loblaws and Sobeys and Walmart remain happy because it's so difficult to get into a market like that. If I could speak on something like insurance
but
today,
you know what
the regulation.
That's why you have to keep those big companies in check. Who do you think is lobbying for those regulatory, all that red tape for competitors to enter the market?
They are, of course.
That's what I mean.
But so what I'm saying is there should just be less regulation altogether.
Why would you regulate them less? How about
because
if a company has an annual revenue less than 50 million, they don't have to follow the same regulations?
Mike, if everyone followed the rules on paper, absolutely, I would agree with you. If in practice, in theory, the rules you put on paper, these are the rules of the game, and people actually follow them, 100% I would agree with you, bro. I'm dead serious. I swear to fucking God. That's why all these people who are book smart, and you're book smart, theoretically speaking, it sounds fucking tastic. Oh my God, that would be a good system. You put a rule and basically people follow it. I'd be for it. But in practice, that's not what actually happens.
So you make them.
But
it's called law.
But that's not
enforcement.
This is where we have a disconnect.
No, but that's the whole point of organizations like the SEC, and that's why these large corporations lobby so that they have 8 employees.
The SEC have been caught multiple times. How many people go from SEC to go work at Goldman Sachs, Mike?
Yeah, and whose fault is that? It's the big business's fault.
It's both of their faults.
No!
It's greed and power.
Exactly.
On both sides.
Exactly.
On both sides.
Yeah, it's not the government's greed and power.
That is the regulatory body's greed and the
regulatory body doesn't make a profit. It's the companies that do.
I understand that.
They're the ones with the greed.
Mike. But what I'm saying is when someone from the SEC, after they have a career in the SEC, and then they go and work at Goldman Sachs.
It's that individual's fault. Yes, of course.
What I'm saying.
I agree. It's that individual's fault who's being influenced by the corporation.
And this is what I'm saying happens in practice. They don't have to deal with the regulations anyways.
Yes,
so therefore, we shouldn't have them there.
Yes, I understand.
That's my logic.
But if
did I explain that clearly?
Yeah, you did. If they were made to deal with the regulation, then we wouldn't have this situation in the first place.
If they were,
they wouldn't be powerful enough to have that influence.
Let's put that in a study case, and when they actually do that, just like how Marxism sounds fucking fantastic. We're gonna have rainbows. Everyone's gonna shit gold. It's gonna be fantastic. On paper, Marxism and communism looks amazing.
Did you think capitalism's working incredibly?
I know that capitalism has pulled more people out of poverty than any other system in the world. And at a time where like even 150, the world, only 10%, like
we used to have a thriving middle class. Now everybody's broke.
150 years ago, the 5% of there was only 5. What was the stat?
You're
again?
talking about during the Great Depression?
No, I'm talking about world.
Because that's
hunger.
when
I'm talking about world.
after
hunger.
the Great Depression, when capitalism failed us, that's when we started implementing regulation and social programs that pulled us out of the.
What system would you have, Mike?
I would have basically the system we have now, just properly enforced.
Which is what?
Which is like, I don't even know what
We don't
would
live
you
in a
call it?
capitalistic society now.
No, we do.
Okay, so
But it's controlled by certain things,
like what?
like government.
It already is,
Yeah, I understand.
and you want more government to control it.
Not necessarily. I just want it to work better. I want to take.
We all want it to work better.
I want
Mike.
to.
How
I
would
want
you
to
do it?
take the power away from corporations by enforcing certain laws and enacting certain laws to control them so that they don't control us.
Bro. I'm all. For
I mean, look, it's
I'm
very.
all for that, man.
It's all like you can't enact one law that makes it better. But like, look at like what happened in the States, like with like that the Citizen United decision when they allowed corporations to have freedom of speech essentially and to contribute to campaigns. What that did is it gave corporations more influence in the political sphere.
I don't like that either.
And that's just one thing. And obviously that one thing maybe wouldn't have made that much of a difference. It probably would have been positive. But if we stop all that, there's these laws being passed every single day in favor of corporations that we just let slide. Like there's this organization in the States called ALEC, and they're basically a lobbying group that writes law favorable to a certain corporation, and their board is made up of just CEOs and lobbyists from a bunch of corporations, and they propose this draft legislation to people that they've donated to campaigns that they've donated to. And then those people take that draft legislation and propose it in whatever parliament they're in. To the point where sometimes, one time the guy didn't even change the watermark on the law. And this was, John Oliver showed this on one of his episodes. The guy, it was like some oil company or oil industry lobbying law that was given to him by ALEC to propose in Parliament, and he forgot to take the ALEC watermark off the example that was given to him.
Okay, yeah.
And so like these things are being done every single day in these little provincial legislatures, the state legislatures in the states that nobody follows.
Yeah.
And they're all basically, individuals don't have that lobbying power.
No.
They don't have the ability to propose legislation directly to a guy, whereas these big groups do, and they do it all the time. And if we were able to stop that in some way, then maybe the law would start working for us as opposed to against us and for multinational corporations.
Dude, I'm all for that. So here, I got a question again. What exactly would you do? Okay, let's back up. Do you agree with the fact that Canada right now has a productivity issue? Our economy is not doing well. We're shrinking. We're in a recession already. If you look at it from a GDP per capita, we have a productivity issue. The economy is not doing well, and the future of the economy does not look bright over the next 5 to 10 years.
I don't know enough about that to argue with you.
Okay, so we are having an issue.
Fine.
And right now, what would be your solution? And what you, from my understanding, your solution would be, well, just tax the corporations what they should actually be paying.
Well, my solution is not necessarily towards productivity. It's if we're in debt, if we're not able to support the people that live here, then there's obviously a problem. So everything is tax rates are based upon what the government needs to make sure society functions. And
at what point is it too much?
Well, but that's the thing, is that it'll never get there if people pay what they're supposed to pay. It'll never happen.
What are they supposed to pay?
the amount that they're legally obliged to.
We all do.
Yeah, I know. We do.
Okay.
Yeah, but major corporations, the one where most of the profit is flowing through,
let's just take the
don't.
TSX. So let's take the TSX,
Okay.
the Toronto Stock Composite, all the stocks, the Canadian companies. I think there's 100 and something companies. I could be wrong about that. So let's just say they all paid, let's say an extra
1%?
let's say an extra 10 billion a year in tax revenue. Let's even put 50 billion
Okay.
per year in tax revenue.
Yeah.
Do you think that would fix it?
Yes.
Why?
Because even if the government's inefficient and only 20 billion goes back to social services, then it would make up the shortfall, whatever it is.
You don't think they would kind of what's the saying? Give an inch, take a mile. You don't think government would try to further expand their power, their reach in Canada? You don't think they would do that?
In what
what
way?
sense? Just more involved. The bigger, if you have all this money, if the government has all this money, they're already hiring more people. They're already increasing their head count for people that work for municipal, people that work for provincial, and people that work for the federal government. There's a lot more employees, federally employed. Government employees.
I don't believe that that's the case.
It is the case.
This
is like no.
That's the stat.
But
that
you're arguing from one that was skewed from Fraser. I'm gonna trust the bank.
I'm not. I don't worry about Fraser. I'm not. No. I'm not talking about. Let's take the bank, and I'll trust your numbers.
Like, and the bank.
What
too,
I'm saying is that number would be produced if the government was just hiring the same amount of people it always did, and corporations were hiring way less. That number would be the same. Do you see what I'm saying?
But it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't.
If all new jobs, if corporations are
that's
freezing
not how
the
it
amount of,
works.
yes, it is.
No, if there's people in the market that are looking for jobs, the government just all of a sudden go poof. Oh, people want jobs. Okay, well, let's create some positions. That's not how it works. What I'm saying is they need to have resources first. They need to have money first. So if they have money first, well, in theoretically speaking, they are like what I think is actually happening here in Canada. They first of all don't know what they're doing with regards. Like I don't think they're doing a good job at all with attracting outside investment into the country. We're not productive as a society itself, and if we're not productive as a society itself, how are we supposed to? When companies are more productive here, we pay more tax. We pay more tax, you can fund the welfare programs better. But if they have more money, they're just going to go out and hire a pile more people.
To do what?
Well, that's the question everyone's asking, and no one knows the answer.
But that's your whole point is that they're inefficient.
They are. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. Every system is going to have inefficiency built into it to an extent or another.
Yes.
It's impossible to be perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like you said, you tax 50 billion.
Yeah.
Even if 20 billion of that gets to where it's designed to go, that is a net positive for 95% of the population. That's just it. And yes, these companies make a bit less money.
Mike,
I don't care.
Mike, I don't disagree with you, bro. Like, for honestly, in a perfect world, I would love if the corporations paid the same damn tax rate that I paid. I would. Yeah. I honestly would. It's not right.
But that's the genius of them, is that they've made you not blame them for that, but blame the government.
Yes,
which is weird.
It's not right. There's loopholes in the tax system, in the tax code, but at the end of the day, like, this is what we got.
Yeah. But the only thing we can force them to do is the cost of doing business here. We can't tax them more, right?
No.
Because they'll just go elsewhere.
Yes.
And then they're subject to a whole different set of rules that we can't control.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can tell Galen Weston, love saying his name.
It's a good name.
Yeah. What we can do is tell him you sell a product that is necessary for the survival of our population, you are not allowed to raise your prices. It's as simple as that. I understand it's crazy, but at the end of the day, he had record profits. If inflation was the cause of his raising the prices, he wouldn't have record profits. Am I right? Mathematically.
Oh, his margins went up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know.
So
I'm not disputing this.
That's just, first of all, that's pure fraud on his part. claiming that he's not making more money, because he is.
No, I
we
checked
can
it out
see
today.
it.
Actually, his gross margins, his
Yes.
is 35%.
We can
It's
see
big.
it.
Yeah, it's big.
And so why, like, especially, and I don't mean forever, but okay, temporarily, this is very hard on the population. Galen, this year, we're going to cap you at 30% profits because our population just can't afford to pay anything
They'll
else.
fudge the numbers. That's really easy. to
Whatever,
do.
fine. Okay, and then you got to do something else. But what I'm
And
saying
they'll
is,
just spend more money on marketing, and they'll do something.
for sure.
Yeah.
And so where does that problem lie? Why would you blame the government for something that Galen is doing? Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I get it. It's just like I feel like
That's all my point
I
is.
feel like I get it. I feel like we're just beating a dead horse, because it's like you're saying, well, we need to do it and enforce the rules and regulations, and then the actual taxes the big corporations should be paying. I agree, but
I think big corporations
just
should
like-
have an obligation to someone else other than their shareholders.
And-
I think there's that whole concept of stakeholder, that they should have a responsibility towards the environment that they do business in.
But it's
An
it's,
environment,
It's
I
never
mean-
going to change. And you ever see the stock picker for Nancy Pelosi?
No.
Yeah, it's fucked. So, because it's whenever a politician buys a stock, it has to be public record. They have to state what
Yeah.
they bought and sold. Go look at her track record for it's insane.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It's
But
fucking insane. Like
but I
they'll
guarantee
buy
you
the stock. And
every
dude,
politician
of
is
course,
insane.
but it's like
Yeah.
it's so out in the open.
Yeah.
it's literally like a week before they
Yeah.
pass legislation.
Yeah, it's
and so
insider
they'll buy the
trading,
stock.
purely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
Well, yeah, they all buy.
this is why
they
this-
buy like Lockheed Martin before they
It's- yeah, yeah.
accept a deal for
yeah.
Saudi Arabia to buy $1 billion worth of
It's
weapons.
nuts. Okay, here I want to switch gears last.
Yeah.
part. Okay, so they were talking about it's called the Bill C-230. So Bill C-230. Do you know Bill C-230?
No.
Okay, so
but
Bill
if you explain it to
C-230
me,
in
I
the
may.
U.S. is very simple. So it's basically
C-230. That's a Canadian formulation. You sure
I
that's
don't
what it's
fu-
called? And you sure it's in the U.S.?
I'm 100% sure. It's the social media. Can you just double check that Bill C-230? It's the
Sounds like a
that might-
Canadian-
but it's basically it absolves liability from companies like YouTube or Facebook
Uh-huh.
or Twitter from being responsible. So let's say they can't be responsible for what the users on the platform are posting.
Okay.
So if someone smears someone else, you can't sue Facebook for that. They're like, hey, we're just a public forum here.
Yeah.
It's Canadian? Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is a bill. I don't know
Yeah,
the exact
no, I
name.
know.
But the bill's there.
I've heard of those.
They're talking about repealing this bill, and to
Wait,
make
so
it.
you're saying, what are they talking about? Making it so that you can sue Facebook?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What's your opinion on that? Facebook or X or YouTube
Yeah.
or whatever, any one of the big ones.
Yeah. I think the debate is whether they're
And
they're a publisher or
yes, a two-part
Yeah.
question. And what impact, if any at all, do you think that would have on free speech?
Well, I think the whole debate is whether they're a publisher or whether they're something. I forget what the other word is. Because if they're a publisher, then they're liable. Like if basically, if I write
New York
kind of
Times
like
writes
yeah,
something.
kind of like Amber Heard did when she wrote that piece about Johnny Depp abusing her, she was held liable, and the Washington Post could have been held liable as well because they're a publisher. So social media companies don't want to be known as a publisher; they want to be known as, I forget what this other word is, but
It's just a platform.
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. Yeah, I think it might be platform. So they're thinking of allowing you to sue the social media company.
They're floating the idea.
I mean, look, it depends on how much you think that these social media companies actually have a value in society. Do I think that they should be sued for what someone else says on their platform? No. I think that they should be made to have certain departments that make sure that some things are taken down. You know, you can't.
But I mean, for
Threaten
Facebook, they have like 20,000 people like going
Yeah.
through this all day. That's their job.
Yeah,
it's content moderation.
Yeah,
like they
and
have that position.
Yeah, and do they need to do a better job? Maybe. I don't know. But no, I don't personally think that they should be held liable for what somebody posts on their website unless you can demonstrate that they were negligent in what duties they do have. Like if, who knows, if one of their moderators saw someone hating on a certain group of people and threatening a certain group of people and purposely left it up there, that's a bit of a different story, because now you're kind of sanctioning what's being written as opposed to not having anything to do with it. So I think there's probably a line to be drawn at some point, but it all depends on really what you think the value of social media is in society and whether you think it actually plays a vital role.
But do you think these companies, these platforms, do you see them more as a town square? Or do you see it more as a private company or publicly traded company?
Well,
but it's a private company, and therefore they are allowed to do what they want because it's their company, their rules. Which side are you on for that? And there's an argument on both sides.
I think they're a private company and they can do whatever they want. And again, that comes down to what you think their value is, because the more valuable you think they are and the more necessary their function, the more you're going to think they're a town hall.
Okay, but here, I'm just going to spin this on you right now. So it's like, if they're a private company, why, and they can do what they want, why are you hammering so hard on Loblaws or other companies, like, or other banks?
Well,
because they're a private company.
Well, because I think they're a private company, and I think that their town hall service that they're providing is just a front. That's not where they make their money.
Well, it is. It's on advertising.
Yeah, correct. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I understand why you want to hold them liable, because they're actively incentivized to allow inflammatory speech on their platforms because it makes them more money. So I just don't think they have a value in society in general. So can they do what they want?
You have an argument.
Can they do what they want? I think so. It doesn't mean it's one thing to be able to run your business the way you want to run it. It's another thing to say that you're subject to the laws that govern people. Now, the essence of their business is that they provide a platform. I don't think they're a publisher. From the letter of the law.
But where I see this, the reason I asked this question, sorry to interrupt, it's just, it's that where I see this going, where it can go is if, all these corporations, Google, Facebook, or Meta, whatever, X, not so much because it's Elon Musk, but let's say Google, Facebook, YouTube, they are risk averse, okay? They're all going to be risk averse. And so if they repeal this law, whatever the law is, it's not bills. Section 230, sorry, not C230.
Okay,
Section 230.
Yeah.
So if they repeal this law, thank you, Shmer, and they can get sued, now all of a sudden it's going to be like, holy fuck. The amount of content moderation and the amounts of censorship, if people think that these platforms are censoring stuff now, wait until this gets repealed, holy fucking shit. You're not going to be allowed to say anything. And it's not going to be, I'm not saying that Facebook or Google, yes, a lot of them live in Silicon Valley. People that typically speak in California are Democrat, and I think it's just naturally, I don't think they're standing there like twirling their mustache like, let's get the Republicans. But I do think they're going to see the world through a lens of a Democrat. They're going to see it through a Democratic lens. I don't think intentionally. But where I'm going with this is if they repeal this, they're going to be so risk averse. Censorship is going to go on steroids. What is going to happen to like free speech and what's going to happen? Because whether we like it or not, X in particular, Facebook, this is where people get their news today. So you do have an argument, like for young kids and Instagram, I agree with you. It can make you feel like shit. There could be bullying. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But it is a news platform, X especially. Mm-hmm. And if we start censoring, which they already are doing, and when stuff starts to get political, so for example, the election's coming up, what's the role of these companies, like politically? And I'm having a tough time like framing my question here. But it's basically, am I kind of explaining this clearly in the sense that if we get rid of this, they're like, hey, we just don't want to get sued. Let's just censor everything or almost everything. If it's even a smidgen of something that we don't agree with. And then all of a sudden we get into stuff, who's the arbiter of truth? Who's making the rules for you can or cannot get sued?
Yeah, but again, it's all based on what you think the value of these social media companies is. Like, I think we got along fine before they were here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need them to have a
Yeah, but we can't just shut down. Like, they're not just going to shut down, Mike. People
no,
will
but
like them.
but that's fine.
Yeah.
So
We can debate on whether they're good for society or not. I frankly think they're terrible for society. I agree. But I think we'll both agree here. I don't think they're going anywhere.
no, I don't think they should be censored unless they're actively promoting something that's illegal.
Okay.
Personally, because I think while most of what some people say is idiotic, you can't.
They're allowed to say it.
They're allowed to say it. You
Yeah.
can't base decisions on just your opinion of one individual comment. It's kind of like, I could relate it back to like what I do for a living, which is a good circle. When I defend someone in particular,
Yeah.
a lot of the times I'll get them off of what they did because their rights were violated, right? And it doesn't mean that they weren't guilty, because a lot of the times they did drive drunk or whatever it may be. The reason that they get off of it is because the court system says, I would rather let this go, even though this person is wrong. I would rather let this go, because if I don't, the implication on the system will be much worse than letting this guy off. If I don't let this guy go, then the police will not understand that they can't just stop anybody on the street and frisk them for no reason. And that would be a much worse effect.
It's like the sanctity of the law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's maintaining the public's confidence in the rule of law. And it's the same type of principle here. We can sanction that one person, or we can censor that one person, but if we do, there could be consequences down the line that we were not expecting, and that have a much more sinister effect on our rights in general. That, in this case, being freedom of speech.
Do you think right now in the West that our institutions we're at kind of like the beginning of some of them starting to fail? Or starting to break a little bit?
Yes. Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Because of the polarization, because of the reliance on random idiots for what they believe is truth and fact. Because when you can convince someone of anything, you have a real democracy fails, because the premise of democracy is it's kind of like capitalism. It's kind of like the free market, in the sense that you're going to go after the best product for the best price, not necessarily the cheapest product, the one that gives you the best value. And the same thing applies with who you're going to vote for. You're basing your decision on facts. That's the whole point. But if a company can come to you and tell you that my product cures cancer, your decision is no longer free and voluntary. It's manipulated, right? So when that happens, all of our systems fall apart, because in a democracy, everything is democratic, essentially. It's not just your manner of election. It's your foundation of society. With democracy comes capitalism, comes certain inalienable rights. And when one of those things fail, the whole thing fails. Maybe not all at the same time. But when you can convince someone, or when people's goals is to mislead, they're no longer making decisions based on
So who would you say
facts.
Who would you say is misleading who right now?
Well, most people, most politicians are,
Yep.
whether on one side or the other. And personally, I believe one side is reacting to the other, but it's no better. Whether you're first or second, whether you're doing it first or reacting, it's just as bad.
Yeah, two wrongs
and
don't make a right.
honestly, it may be even worse. Reacting to it may be even worse because you're choosing to do it to combat an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, so.
But this like for, I hate when you say that for, because I just when you say idiots.
No, but I don't. You're presuming I'm referring to Republicans. That's your presumption. What I was referring to is someone who tells a lie and then you react to it.
Yeah.
You're basically giving them like credence by altering your behavior because of them. It's kind of like, did you see Shane Gillis's stand-up?
Yeah.
Where he says that the best way to debate Trump is to be Biden because Biden has no idea what he's talking about, and that's a
you're gay.
Yeah, that's
your son's gay.
And then he's like, what? And then he's like, fuck, he's a genius. And that's the whole point is that you shouldn't react to that stuff.
Yeah.
And because it's nonsense. So that I think is the biggest threat to our democracy is people being told and believing things with no fact and no factual backing. And that's kind of why I raised the question about social media.
But it's become so difficult. And if we were to actually talk about, I love talking about this, it's almost more like philosophical because yes, they have the corporations not paying their fair share and that I'll agree is part of it, but there's something deeper that's going on in Western society in particular right now.
Yes.
And I can't put my thumb on it.
Well,
I can't put my finger on it.
It's that people are being pushed to the limit. So when anger builds, when you have something to, and we spoke about this last time, is the best way to control crime is to make sure people have something to lose. Because there's a reason why when you're happy, you don't do things. You don't cause trouble because you're content. You're happy. When you have a large portion of society that's angry, some of them will respond positively or productively. They'll gather, they'll try to make change. Some of them will respond negatively, whether that be violently or just counterproductively. And eventually, when people's anger starts to overcome basic tenets of society, that's when you run into problems. And I wish I knew the quote off the top of my head, but when a certain group, eventually you're gonna keep taking away and keep taking away and keep taking away to the point where most people are going to have nothing to lose. Our wealth gap is going to get to a point where a large portion of society has nothing.
That was there was this guy, I forget who was talking about it, but he said exactly that. He said your civilization will break when there's too many people at the bottom with nothing to lose. That's when shit starts to break. I think that they don't care.
Yeah, I think the quote is when one group is made to feel like they're being oppressed, degraded, and robbed, neither person nor property will be safe. So it's very well and good that there's this 1% of the population that's going to be extremely rich, but if you push that too far, you will lose everything because at a certain point it will not be accepted.
And this is where if you want my honest opinion, this is where I think, well, this is number one, how societies collapse.
Yeah,
I think it's too far gone. Honestly,
it could be.
I think it's too far gone.
It could be.
And on like when I was hooting and hollering
That's what
about
happened
earlier
in the Great Depression.
Yeah, like when I was hooting and hollering earlier about kind of, well, we should tax them more. And my point is just, I would fucking love to do that, man, but I don't think it's going to happen. That's where I'm at now. Maybe I'm like cynical, and
I don't disagree. I don't think it's, if I go by the evidence of what we could try to accomplish now, I don't think we can get any of it done.
I don't think we're going to.
They're too powerful,
Yeah.
and they're not going to let it happen. The only way it's going to happen is by force. And that's very unfortunate because every time that happens, a lot of bad things happen. You know what I mean? Luckily, it hasn't happened yet. But that's what's happening in other countries, and that's why we have so much immigration. And again,
what's the pain though that people are feeling right now? Like what's going on?
Well,
What do you think it is?
I mean, what I can,
and we're not people that we haven't experienced it.
No, I can only guess and say what I've been seeing, but like, theft is up a lot. And the thing is people are not stupid. Like when someone commits a crime, like when someone steals to profit, or when someone deals drugs and they get punished for it, but more importantly, society views that as fair. You know what I mean? But when, and I see this a lot, when a mother of 3 kids goes to the supermarket and scans half her items and doesn't scan the other half, and is arrested for theft because she can't afford the new prices, that punishment for something like that erodes your confidence in society. It doesn't seem fair because it's not. And it starts with little things. Like, so what happens, okay, when somebody steals from, especially a supermarket, but also like Simon's and some of those other places, what'll happen is they'll get criminal charges, but they'll also receive a letter in the mail, and it's a demand letter from the company, actually from a law firm, this one law firm that I won't name, that works for these major grocers. And the letter basically says, you committed a theft on this day in the amount of, let's say, $150. We are requesting that you pay us $1,000. Do you know what they're charging them for? The cost of maintaining their security system. So they actually didn't lose the money, by the way, because the theft, 90% of thefts are stopped before they leave the store. Or at least, sorry, out of the ones that are caught.
Yeah.
There's probably more that aren't caught, and I don't want to diminish that. But out of the ones that are caught, 9 out of 10 times they're caught with the stuff and they take it back, right? So they don't actually lose any money. So not only are they charging them for the amount that they stole, that they got back, but also for the maintenance of their security system that they put in place. So I have clients that come and they show me this letter, and I'm like, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it, and I reached out to the law firm basically telling them, I think what you're doing is very unethical, and obviously they don't care, but essentially they claim all that money to this person, and maybe sometimes they're doing it just to profit, but I don't see many people stealing from supermarkets to profit.
No.
And maybe they can afford it and they're just trying to save money. But a good portion of them are doing it because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's so crazy that they end up claiming 8 times the amount of the theft. And not only do they do that, but they also say, because they assume people are stupid, They say, if you pay us the amount we're requesting, it could help you with your criminal charge. So basically what they're telling them is, if you pay us, they'll go easier on you criminally, which is 1, a lie, 2, illegal to tell them because they don't know. So they're trying to scare them into paying them way more than they owe them, essentially. And you can't believe that a company would have this kind of practice, especially when you know that even maybe some of them are single mothers that can't afford to feed their children. And I forget where I was going with this. Where was I going with this?
I don't know.
What were we talking about?
We're basically just talking about when society starts to break.
Right. At a certain point, it becomes so clear that, just like you said, like with like the politicians and their investments, it becomes so clear that you can't deny it.
It's in the open.
Exactly.
It's like they're not even hiding it.
Exactly.
Now. It's like, oh, you have to declare it. Like, okay, I'll declare it. So they just declare it, and it's so clearly insider trading.
Exactly. And that's also what I would argue. It's so clear that the 1% get all the benefits. Like, if you look at like the wage graphs adjusted for inflation,
it's crazy.
It's crazy how stagnant they've been versus
everyone else,
versus the CEO pay or the board of directors pay. It's insane.
Yeah.
And eventually, it's already out in the open. If you want to know it, you know it. And eventually, it's going to be even more clear. And eventually, it'll be to the point where no one's going to stand for it. And that's when shit hits the fan. And that's what these people can't understand. They have such a good thing going, but greed, the nature of greed is that you can't stop. You're a drug dealer and you make 2 nice, successful 10 kilos of coke deals, and you make a good 500 grand. I don't know what it's worth.
Whatever.
I'm just
Sounds like a
ballparking.
good number.
Never done the math. You won't stop after that.
No.
You physically can't, and that's the point. And that's why greed is such a disease, because if people just stopped, if people said, okay, me having $1 billion is enough money, maybe everything else I do now is for the greater good, then we wouldn't have a problem. Do you know what I mean? We just wouldn't. But
I had that
they're unable to stop.
I had that thought the other day because I think that's kind of what's happening in sports leagues as well right now. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to go see a hockey game, to go to the Habs game, to go see the Toronto Maple Leafs, to go like any major sporting event. It's absolutely insane. And I was just down in London. We went to go see a Chelsea Football Club match, and they have a bunch of seats reserved for locals, and I think they call them super fans or basically. And they're regularly priced tickets. It was a $60 ticket. We were 6 rows up from the center of the field. It was £60, and I loved that. And I was just thinking,
wait, why? Like, why was it so cheap?
Because
why were you able to get it?
We went with a guy. We had to go a friend of a friend. Basically, we had to speak to Brez and Sven, who spoke to a guy at Burgundy Lion, who's like part of this international Chelsea Football Club fan, who called the guy in London. And then the guy in London came to the game with us. He brought us. Me and Pete. So it was all 3 of us. And so we were sitting in the home section.
So he had to buy the tickets.
Well, we paid him.
Yeah,
but we had to be sitting with a current a fan
member of this thing. Yeah.
But I thought it was so cool, and it just makes you think like, what difference does it? I do agree with you. What difference does it make if your company's worth $1 billion or $5 billion? The answer is none.
Yeah, really.
Or like if you're worth $100 billion or $1 billion, your life is going to be the same.
Exactly.
And it's
because you physically can't. It's going to be the same for your family. Yes. 6 generations down.
Now I don't agree. And this is where we break. Now I don't agree that the government should just come and take it, because governments have shown us time and time again, reading a history book, that they will abuse their power. So I don't agree with that, but I do agree that it's too much. And I love when I see, there are a lot of really fucking rich people. Warren Buffett, for example, there's this pledge or whatever. When he dies, he's giving the vast majority of his wealth to society. Yeah. He's giving it back.
But the problem is if you only have a few of those people and no one else does it, and you need it to be done, what do you do from that point? Yeah, maybe, okay, I agree with you. If people were better, maybe we wouldn't need the government intervention. But they're not. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it sets
because
up,
and it's not that they're sorry.
yeah.
It's not that they're bad.
Yeah.
It's that greed is a disease.
Yeah.
Like, and you physically can't stop. You wouldn't trust a drug dealer with dog sitting or babysitting or staying in your house while you're on vacation.
I would trust Tony Soprano.
Okay, fine. A drug addict then. Right? Because they're going to act in their interest. So we can't trust them with the house. If we could, it would be lovely.
Yeah.
If a business said, you know what, at this point I'm this successful, I'm just going to stop making profit for a little while and give everything back, that would be great, and it would benefit everybody. But it's just not going to happen because of the way businesses are structured. Because they're not structured. It would be nice if you can say, if your business takes off, you can say, holy shit, like I have too much money and I don't need this much money. But the way a publicly traded corporation is structured, that can never happen because they're not allowed to do it. If a CEO did that, he would go to jail because he would be acting against.
He wouldn't go to jail. No.
Yeah, he
wouldn't go
would.
to jail.
Of course he would.
It would never happen. That's the passive board of the
Well, no.
directors. No,
Would he go to? Would someone prosecute that? Probably not.
Yeah.
But the shareholders would sue him for everything he's worth
Yeah.
because he cost them money. Is that okay? Why? So a selfless person who decides to.
Well, he could do it individually.
Yeah,
after.
I mean, of course.
He could if he makes a pile of money and let's
with
say
his
the
own
CEO
money,
of
yes.
the company is worth $10 billion at the end.
Yes, with his
He
own
can
money,
do whatever he wants
can.
with his money.
Yes,
but it's money on behalf of.
but the greatest amount of money is the shareholder
I
money.
think, but that just goes to show you. But the shareholders, I mean, there are a publicly traded company. There's a lot of shareholders who are also not filthy fucking rich, and they'd be fucking pissed if they gave their money.
That's
what
the
I mean?
point. Is that the shareholders? You're right.
Like,
aren't
I own shares of a company. I'm not
course.
a filthy rich.
You're
you know,
not, but you're also in the top 10% of the population.
I'd say top 1%.
Probably, but that's my point.
Not to be cocky, I probably
is
am,
that
though.
the 90% of the population doesn't own any shares in anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an accurate stat. I'm just saying.
Worldwide, probably more.
Yeah. Exactly. So, yes, some shareholders aren't millionaires, but they're part of that. When they say that money is being filtered to the top, that's what they mean, because shareholders are only 1% of the population and they're the ones making money. You know what I mean? And the rest of the world is operating on a salary where it's been stagnant for the last 50 years, adjusted for inflation. So all that extra wealth that's being produced by advances in technology is going to one particular segment of the population. And a lot of times that advancement in technology isn't even being developed by these companies. A lot of the times it is with government subsidies. Right? Like, hypothetically, the Canadian government subsidized the research project at the University of Toronto that led to the creation of insulin. And they gave the patent away for $1 to 3 pharmaceutical companies because they didn't have the ability to produce the insulin. So instead of the pharmaceutical companies doing the right thing and selling it for a reasonable price, every year they tweak insulin
So they can repatent
just to
it.
the point where they can repatent it
Yeah.
and gouge consumers. Not only consumers, diabetics who, if they don't take it, will die. So that's what happens when you leave something to a free market.
This is where here we'll finish up with this, but
Yeah.
this is where I always find it fascinating that, like, so you just mentioned the corporate greed side of pharma, and yet I find it so interesting that when COVID was going on, you were on their side.
No, I was not.
You weren't.
No.
You were not I thought my
at no
understanding-
point did I think that they
Everyone
had
should
our
be
best interest
vaccinated.
in. No, I thought everybody should be vaccinated, but I
So
thought
you're
that
on their side.
No, I thought that because that's what experts were saying.
So what was your opinion of pharma during COVID?
I think that they profited from they loved it.
Yes.
Do I think it was a huge conspiracy by them? No. What I think it was them being like, we just hit the fucking jackpot. Let's exploit this as much as possible.
Yes.
That's what it was. And they had a vested interest in doing it. I don't put anything
But
past
you don't
corporations.
think it was like, I don't want to say conspiratorial, but you don't think at one point, I mean, who funds the big media networks? Who are the biggest advertisers? It's pharma.
I mean, some of them, yeah, but some of them are independent.
But what I'm saying, pharma is on Fox. It's 70%.
Well, it's just because they're just loaded. So they fund a lot of people, and
But you don't
the
think
media is
there's gonna-
funded by a bunch of industries, pharma, oil, a bunch of industries. Yes,
But
pharma's a part of it.
Pharma's a big part of it.
Yeah, because
the vast
they're
majority part
yeah,
of
because
it.
they're just a big.
But you don't think that's
it's a huge
You
industry.
don't think that's a conflict of interest a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Does it mean that there was a conflict in what was being reported? Not necessarily. There could have been.
I'm so confused. I'm really curious about where, and it was just swept right under the rug. How the vaccines were supposed to stop transmission, and then at the end of it, they're like, "We never said that," and you're like, "Whoa,
I don't think
whoa,
they ever said that it's
Yes, of course.
I don't think they ever. Well, it did stop transmission.
No, it didn't. The
Yes, it did.
vaccine. No, Mike.
Yes, it did. To a certain
Michael,
extent, it did.
Michael, the vaccines.
They never said it was perfect.
The vaccines have been proven they did not stop transmission, and the pharma companies have come out and said like, we never said that, and so it's just interesting, and they basically just stopped covering it.
Okay, no. See, that's a conspiracy theory. So, they said it from the beginning that vaccines are a certain amount, or they're effective to a certain extent at stopping transmission, just like masks are. And does it mean that there will be no transmission? No.
I'm sorry I asked this question. I don't even want to talk about this.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about COVID's like, I don't want to get into that whole debate.
I don't care.
I'm sorry for asking that.
But some people
Let's
thought it
end
was
on
some
a-
Russian conspiracy.
No, I don't think it's
Like-
that. No, I don't think it's that.
Yeah,
It's just
okay.
like there's all this, and then you're gonna read all these sources.
You're not one of our friends in
That-
our group.
Yeah. But it's just like, you know what I mean? You start
He who
to-
shall not be named.
But you know what I mean when you start getting down that it's like
He knows
said,
who he
she
is.
said, what?
He knows
Which
who
guy?
he is.
Which guy? What's his first letter of his name?
P. Which camera should I wink at? Hey.
All right, man. Here, look,
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to leave it. We're kind of
Sure.
going down a rabbit hole there. I didn't feel like
Yeah.
debating
What else
that.
is new?
Yeah. Mike, Mr. Michael Khoury, I appreciate you coming on.
Always a pleasure.
Second time. Hopefully
Yeah.
there'll be a third time.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you want.
And this is the Freemium Podcast. I'm Curtis Killen. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.